Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019, and I'm, of course, as always, your host, Ryan Bloom. It's been kind of a busy month here, folks. I'm not gonna lie. Not just, the usual stuff, but, kind of a busy month for me in terms of writing and everything else. It just so happened that July ended up being this kind of weird month where a lot of releases fell out of nowhere for no reason. Just all of a sudden, Sega specifically, well, not necessarily Sega, but kind of Sega, specifically targeted July as this big release month for games that I wanted to review or games that I was requested to review. So, for example, through TSSC News, I had to review SolSeraph, a game from Ace Team, which is kind of like a spiritual successor to, ActRaiser on the Super Nintendo. Really old Super Nintendo launch title by Enix back before they even, joined Square to become Square Enix. Then there was Judgment, the spin-off game from the Yakuza team. It's, instead of playing like an illegal crime man, Kazuma Kiryu or whatever, you play a disgruntled lawyer, I think the back of the box quote says. I was requested to review that. And then on top of that, I also, for myself, I wanted to review Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. So it ended up being this case where 3 games dropped within a week of each other. And I'm still, as I record this podcast, juggling those reviews at the same time. My SolSeraph review is up on TSSC News right now. You can go read that. There will be a link in the podcast show notes. But I am still in the process of working on the Crash Team Racing review, and I'm still in the process of working on the Judgment review. And just between you and me, I haven't started Judgment yet. I've been a little bit afraid to start Judgment. Those Yakuza games, or Yakuza, or however you say that, I'm probably, that's one of those words where you say it perfectly in your head, and you never actually think about how it's pronounced, how your lips say it. And I think in my head I say Yakuza, but for some reason it comes out a different way of my mouth, and that is completely bizarre to me. But those games are not short. Those games can easily be 50, 60, 100 hours. And I've never played a Yakuza game. I have Yakuza Kiwami around here somewhere, the Steelbook version that I bought when I got my PlayStation 4, November 2017, December 2017. I bought that game and I've been sitting on it because I've been afraid of it. And now I'm forced to play Judgment. I can't avoid it. It will be my first game from that team. And I've been putting it off because I'm a little afraid of it. And, that also, I'm sort of tackling these reviews one at a time. So I kind of want to get Crash Team Racing out of the way first before I jump into Judgment. And Crash Team Racing is taking a really long time to review because actually the way I acquired that game was sort of weird and confusing. I told Tristan, my boss at TSSZ, hey, I'm interested in reviewing Crash Team Racing. And, well, I guess we need to back up even further. This is classic podcast territory here. It came up through my YouTube network, Screenwave Media. I actually got an email from my channel manager, and he was like, hey, we have a bunch of codes for these 3 games. The publisher sent us a bunch. If anyone wants to review these games, let me know. And one of them was Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled for the PlayStation 4. And I thought, okay, we're hot off Team Sonic Racing. It would be actually really fun if I did a comparison video between Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled and Team Sonic Racing. And on top of that, right around that time, we got a comment on TSSZ News on my Team Sonic Racing review asking, how does Team Sonic Racing stack up to Crash Team Racing? And I thought, okay, this will all dovetail perfectly. I will, put in for this review code through my YouTube network, and if I get it, then I'll write it for TSSZ. 2 weeks passed, because, this was a month before the game came out. 2 weeks passed, and I didn't hear anything back from my YouTube network. So I sent them an email, and I said, hey, I guess, if I haven't gotten a confirmation for the Crash Team Racing review code by now, I'm probably left out to dry, right? And my channel manager, very graciously responded, and he said, yeah, if you haven't gotten the code yet, you're probably not going to get a code. So, within 4 days of getting that email back, I told Tristan, Tristan saying, hey, here's, Sega wants to give us a SolSeraph review code. Sega wanted to give us a Judgment review code. And the way that works, I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about this. This might be NDA'd, but they send out these surveys, like these interest surveys, and they say, hey, are you interested in reviewing this Sega game? We'll send you a copy. And, you kind of have to fill out this questionnaire that says, here's my interests, I am interested in the game. Will you send me the code? And based on that survey, they determine whether or not you are worthy for a code. And they'd sent us one for Judgment. They'd also sent us one for Citizens of Space, the sequel to Citizens of Earth. And they passed us over for Judgment. They said, no, for whatever reason, you don't get a Judgment code. That's just the way it is. So Tristan was keen. He said, well, hey, we should probably review Judgment anyway. I'll buy you a copy. It'll be a business expense, that sort of thing. So I said, okay, whatever. At the same time, I told him, hey, I'm interested in playing Crash Team Racing. And he said, okay, I'll buy you that game as well. So I got sent the money. I put in the order. Amazon completely screwed up that order, by the way. I'm actually getting really fed up with Amazon shipping. When we first moved into this apartment, everything shipped super fast. I didn't even have Amazon Prime, but because we live basically on the California border, there is an Amazon warehouse a 2-hour drive from here. You cross the mountains to the west and you're in California, and that's where the Amazon shipment facility is. And when we first moved here, I would order stuff from Amazon and it would be here in a day and a half. And that was with the cheapest free shipping option. That wasn't Amazon Prime. That's just how it worked. If Amazon shipped it out, it was here in a day and a half. So that made me inclined to order things from Amazon. And since then, in this calendar year, 2019, everything I've ordered from Amazon has been a disaster. Things getting lost in the mail, essentially. Me putting in orders for items that were technically sold out and they never told me it was sold out. So I ended up with this thing where I was getting a delivery notice for, what was it? It was Dragon Quest Builders. I was getting delivery today, and then it would suddenly get pushed back. And this went on for a month and a half where, it would say Dragon Quest Builders is on the truck for delivery today. And then the end of the day would come and it would say, oops, we couldn't deliver your package. And they'd push it back, another week or whatever. It's because the game was out of stock and they weren't telling me it was out of stock. And I ended up getting this, really pushy Amazon service agent that, very hastily applied a Band-Aid to the situation and basically canceled my order and told me to reorder it from somewhere else on Amazon. It was a nightmare, basically. Anyway, the same thing happened basically with Crash Team Racing and Judgment. The day a delivery came, it was supposed to be here, I think I ordered it on June 22nd, right? And at that point, that was a pre-order for Crash Team Racing. That was a pre-order for Judgment. They were supposed to be here, I was actually a little surprised that I was pre-ordering these games, technically speaking, even though, they came out 3 or 4 days later, but that it said estimated delivery will be July 8th. That's almost 2 weeks away when you figure, I'm ordering this from Amazon, it's going to ship from Amazon, and it's going to take 2 weeks to get delivered, even though the launch date was July 2nd or whatever. It seemed like a mess, but I figured, whatever, shipping is weird. I'll accept that. July 8th rolls around, and suddenly I get an email from Amazon, this is the date of delivery we're talking. And Amazon sends me an email, oops, there was a payment problem, your order could not be completed. They waited until the date of delivery, the estimated date of delivery, to tell me that there had been a payment problem and that the order could not be completed. So what that ended up happening was, that's a big complex thing with my debit card. Sometimes it costs me $1 or $2 to make a transaction on that thing, because it's kind of a weird, cheap debit card and I need to get a better one. What had happened is I put the exact amount on my debit card, because that's how I order things online. If it's something that has to order and deliver to my house and they don't support PayPal, that's when I use this debit card. Anyway, it comes down to the fact that I'd put basically exact change on my debit card. Not down to the penny, but we'll say, a wiggle room of about 5 or 10, maybe 25 cents. Which, in retrospect is now a mistake, because what had happened is somehow in the process of this, Amazon had charged me sort of twice. When I made the pre-order, they charged me $1 for that pre-order or something like that. I'd have to double check my emails or double check my Amazon account, I guess. But they charged me $1 for the pre-order. There was like some kind of, I don't know, it was like a pre-order fee or something, which subtracted like just enough off my debit card that when it came time to process my order, I was like 75 cents short. So Amazon sat on this information. They're like, oh no, the money's not in the debit card. They sat on this information until the day it was supposed to be delivered. And they didn't notify me this until the date of delivery. So, I was super angry at this. That's kind of a ridiculous thing to do. If there's not enough money on the debit card, tell me immediately so that I can add, an extra couple bucks to sort out this problem so that it meets the date of delivery. So I ended up canceling everything on Amazon. I said, screw you. I figured I could just go out and buy Judgment. Oh, wait, skipping a thing here. The same day that this happened, that Amazon notified me on the date of delivery that I was, 75 cents short on meeting how much it would cost to order Judgment and Crash Team Racing on the same bill, my YouTube network sent me a code for Crash Team Racing. Apparently my request had gone through, and instead of getting the game before release, like I have been with Sega games, they gave me a code on the date of release, and they didn't tell me that I was going to be earning this code until launch day, basically. So I went to Amazon, I canceled the whole order. They refunded me all of my money. Well, technically, they didn't even refund me my money because they never took the money off the debit card in the first place because, again, I was 75 cents short. Anyway, I canceled my whole Amazon order. I figured, okay, I have Crash Team Racing now. I'll start playing Crash Team Racing tonight, and then, tomorrow I'll go to Walmart or whatever, and I'll go buy Judgment in person. Head to Walmart. It was actually later that night. Instead of, installing Crash Team Racing, I just went to Walmart. They didn't have Judgment. They've never had Judgment. They've never stocked Judgment. Went to GameStop across the street. They didn't have Judgment. Nobody around here has Judgment, so I ended up having to order it online, which tacked on, another week and a half. Even GameStop, because this time, I ordered Judgment through GameStop. Apparently when I ordered that Xbox 360 at the start of the year from GameStop, that refurbished one or whatever, I signed up for their Edge Rewards program again. I don't remember doing this, but apparently I did. It might have been part of like a warranty thing or something. I don't know. But what this meant was that, through their Edge Rewards program on GameStop.com, what this meant is that, it said I got free 2-day shipping. So I figured, great. I'll have Judgment, it'll only be 2 days later than I expected. I put my order in through GameStop and it said, okay, well, your order won't be here until like July 12th, July 13th. There was no 2-day shipping, even though it said, free 2-day shipping. So that's that whole mess. And all of this is to explain the fact that because I got Crash Team Racing through my YouTube network, the requirement for that is that I have to make a video for it. That is, kind of like part of this contract here, is that I cannot just get a free copy of Crash Team Racing. They won't really accept a text article, I don't think. I have to publish a video on my YouTube channel of Crash Team Racing. So, in addition to writing a review for Crash Team Racing, the text review part is done, has been done for over a week now. I'm, also in the process of putting together this Crash Team Racing versus Team Sonic Racing video that kind of compares the two and comes up with a judgment at the end on which of the two games is better. So I've been writing the script on that. I've been capturing footage. I'm actually, pretty ready to go through and start recording like dialogue narration for that video, and then, cutting everything together. It's getting there. It's almost done. And then once that's done, then I can post the text review. I can attach the video to it. That video will go up on my YouTube channel. I can go into my YouTube network management system and, check the box that says, hey, I did a video on Crash Team Racing. I've fulfilled my contract, and then everything will be okay. And then I'll start Judgment. And then, Judgment will be minimum 30 hours, I think. So that'll be a long game. But, I'm hearing good things about Judgment. I'm hearing that it's actually probably the best Yakuza game since Yakuza 0. So, that's probably pretty high praise. I try not to read too many reviews before I go into a thing, but it's also, kind of impossible to avoid. But that has been my entire July. Is just kind of worrying about doing these 3 reviews back to back to back to back. And it's crazy. I need to get it done real quick because I feel like, there's going to be more coming here soon that I'm going to have to focus on. Obviously, I said that Shenmue video. I've written a little bit on that since then. Not tons because, I've been focusing on Crash Team Racing and SolSeraph so far. But I ended up watching like a Giant Bomb video, a demo derby, in fact, where they were talking about Shenmue, and hearing Jeff Gerstmann talk about Shenmue kind of gets your blood going, gets your brain thinking about things. It's kind of weird to think that I'll have like 2 videos in the pipeline that are kind of like responses to things Jeff Gerstmann has said about Sega games. That's obviously not the impetus for these videos, but that's kind of how it's shaking out a little bit. But yeah, I need to get that Shenmue video taken care of before I lose my Xbox Game Pass for PC. So, once I get through Judgment, then it's kind of like it's got to be a sprint towards Shenmue before Shenmue 3 comes out and before I lose my Xbox Game Pass. I can feel it. I can feel it already. I can feel the stress building up. Whew. Anyway, technically it was my birthday this month. You'll notice, YouTube listeners, this podcast is just going up. There's no 1 month delay. But that will mean that, you won't get August podcast until September. So, you're going to get like a double long wait there for a moment because, you're getting your July podcast early, essentially. But yeah, I had a birthday this month, at the start of the month, in fact. It's one of those things where, like, you don't even really think about it anymore because, I'm getting up there to where if I didn't, like, directly pay attention to it, I probably wouldn't remember how old I am, but, I do pay attention to it. So, I am pretty sure I'm 36 now. Definitely getting to be closing in on middle age, which is a little bit of a scary thing to think about. But that's just growing up, that's 1 year older, 1 year wiser, 1 year closer to the grave. That's how it goes. But whatever. I actually had to like really struggle to think what I got for my birthday this year. Cause the further into adulthood you get, the kind of the less birthdays matter. I ended up getting like, I think so far the only gifts I've received was from my mom. So she got me like a new belt for my pants. And she got me like a pin to put on my Android tablet case. That's it. That's what I got for my birthday. I heard from a friend that I was, apparently supposed to be expecting a birthday present. But it is July 23rd at this point, and so far it hasn't shown up yet. So, I'm pretty confident it will show up eventually, probably. But it just hasn't shown up yet. And then there was something else, something a little bit weird that kind of caught me off guard. If for whatever reason you want to get me like a belated birthday present or whatever, there are links on my Tumblr blog. I'll probably put the link here in my in the podcast show notes or whatever. I do have like a selection of wish lists where you can buy things for me if you want. But before my birthday, we're talking like July 5th, July 4th, I was organizing an Amazon wish list. Because, I've basically had the same wish list on Amazon probably since my Amazon account was started. So there's things in there that I added like all the way back in 2011, 2010, 2009 even. It's a very old wish list, and I've been slowly adding to it over the years. But I was managing that wish list, removing things that I bought for myself or whatever, adding new things, new cheap things, because, things on an Amazon wish list tend to age a little bit. And when they go out of stock, they kind of start going up in price. So I have like an amiibo on that wish list that somebody on Amazon is trying to sell for like $200, which is outrageous, but, that's... People are morons. There are morons that will pay for it, and there are morons that think people will pay for it. And it's this kind of weird symbiotic relationship or whatever. But to counter that, I'm trying to at least trickle in some new things towards the top that are still in stock, still pretty cheap, things like that. And one of the things on there was like, I thought I had like a boom arm from my microphone, right? It's one of those, it's like, if you've ever seen like a radio studio where they have their microphone on this kind of metallic spring-loaded arm thing, that's what was on there. They're pretty cheap. They're like, $10 or $15. The microphone screws into it. Having something like that would make it easier for me to, say, start streaming whenever I wanted, because I could just leave the microphone hooked up all the time. I wouldn't have to find space for it to sit on my desk like I am right now to record this podcast. It would just be a little bit more convenient to deal with. And I thought I had one on my Amazon wish list. I know I put it on there many, many years ago. And what I ended up doing while organizing my Amazon wish list is I put it back on the wish list. Because again, it was on there at one point and now it was gone. So I re-added it, and Amazon said, Ryan owns one, which means Amazon thinks someone bought it for me, or Amazon thinks I already own one. Which is weird because I never got one. So, there was a part of me that thought, okay, well, someone bought it for me. It'll be here. It'll be delivered sometime in the future. And, this was like, July 5th, and it's the 23rd. And, if anyone bought that thing for me, it's never been delivered. We're talking a good 2 weeks since whenever I found that out. If someone had bought it for me, it would have been, even days before that. So I don't know if that was just like an Amazon glitch or whatever. Amazon thinks I own one of these microphone boom arms or whatever. I don't know what the deal was, but that's a weird thing that I thought I might be getting for my birthday and I never did. So I don't know. It's weird is what it is. What else here is on my notes? Oh, happy birthday to me. We've been having problems with our cat again. You may remember about a year ago, almost a year ago exactly, it was in June of last year, we were worried she was dying because, she started having problems where she would throw up constantly. And, eventually she stopped eating. It was a whole big, very sad process that she thankfully recovered from. She bounced back, she started eating again. We found out that it was kind of like she had like an impacted hairball. And once we started giving her hairball medication and she started, passing these giant hairballs, her appetite came back. She seemed to be fine. And then about a month and a half later, she started getting worse again. She started having chronic episodes of vomiting, chronic episodes of diarrhea. And we tried everything. We tried, switching her food multiple times, to things that would be easier on an upset tummy. And, she just was slowly getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Until, a couple weeks ago, it finally came to a head and we figured, okay, she's suffering. We should probably take her into the vet and, put her down. The vet pushed back against us, not hard, but, gently. He offered to run some, cheap tests for us because we looked up online and, these kind of problems are chronic in some cats. And, there are theories as to why. Some people think it has to do with their diet, which is one of the reasons why we were changing her food. We changed her food, 3 times over the years. At first, we stopped giving her dry food because we thought that was making her sick. We tried to find food that didn't have any gravy in it, because there was, reports of people, the gravy was making their cats sick in their canned cat food. So we tried to find, cat food without gravy. We'd give her usual wet cat food, but we'd wash the gravy off before we'd give it to her. And then, we started buying special dietary cat food that was, very specifically targeted towards kitties with upset stomachs. And then, very last thing, within the last 6 weeks, we gave her what is called a bland diet, which is just, raw chicken, not raw chicken, cooked chicken, boiled chicken in rice. Basically it is the most simple food you can give a cat. No gravy, no anything like that. It's supposed to be very easy on their stomach. No salt, no anything like that. Again, you boil everything out of it. You boil all the juices out. It's for cats with sensitive stomachs. And she wasn't getting any better. But also, this bland diet we put her on was within like 4 days of going to the vet. So what we found out is we hadn't given her enough time to adjust to the change in her food. Going from canned cat food to basically people food. And that's what was causing her to, get this sharp uptick in getting really bad. Her diarrhea would just stink up the whole apartment. It smelled like something died, to put it lightly. But we took her to the vet, and the vet was like, oh, it could be, gastrointestinal. She could have kidney disease, which again is another common problem for cats that get, sufficiently old. And we don't know how old she is. When we got her, she could have been 3 years old. She could have been 5 years old. We've had her for 7 years, almost gonna be 8 soon. So, she's getting up there in the years as far as we can tell. And kidney disease is something that elderly cats get sometimes. He thought maybe she had hypothyroidism. He ran like thyroid tests. I'm kind of being scattershot here. I apologize for that because it ended up being kind of an emotional blur. I actually at one point I said goodbye to her, a very tearful goodbye one night. We gave her like special last meals and everything. We really thought this was the end of the cat. That's just how it is. And we took her in. And again, he said, well, it could be kidney disease. It could be gastrointestinal problems, which, we knew. It could be hyperthyroidism. And if you don't know what that is, it's like a metabolism disease because that's the other thing, right? She's dropped a lot of weight. When we moved here to Nevada in July of 2017, she weighed 12, almost 13. Well, she weighed 12 pounds on the nose. We think she probably weighed 13 pounds earlier, back when we lived in Colorado. But by the time we'd moved out here, all the stress of moving and whatever, she was 12 pounds on the nose, 12.0. But, that's still made for a pretty hefty kitty. She's a big Maine Coon, but she was also a very, a pretty chubby Maine Coon. I look at old photos of her before we moved out here to Nevada, and she looks like a little football almost. She had quite a tummy on her. And since then, since she was weighed at 12 pounds, we took her into the vet, and she weighed 5.2 pounds. So she'd lost, over 2/3 of her body weight. She is skin and bones. You pet this cat, and, you can feel the ridges on her spine. She lost a lot of weight. And that is a symptom of hyperthyroidism. It is a very overactive metabolism. You eat and you eat and you eat, and you never feel full. You never gain weight. It is a very serious condition. And the opposite of that is hypothyroidism, where you eat very little and you gain, huge, massive amounts of weight. We actually think that's what's wrong. That might be what's wrong with my mom. She's the kind of person that eats once a day, and she is not happy with her weight, but she never seems to lose it. Anyway, the cat is incredibly skinny. She's incredibly lethargic, low energy. She's not absorbing carbs like she should, which is, again, hyperthyroidism. So he ran a test for hyperthyroidism in her, came back negative. We were worried because we read that, with these kind of gastrointestinal issues, usually to run proper tests requires invasive surgery. They essentially have to cut the cat's stomach open and see what's going on in there. which, costs thousands and thousands of dollars, which is why we were thinking of putting her down. Is, we can't afford $2,500 just to run a test, never mind, corrective surgery or anything like that. But, he ran the thyroidism test, came back negative. He offered us some tips. He gave us some, special cat food that they had there at the vet. She loved that cat food. It was very specifically for cats with, maybe liver issues, maybe, metabolism issues, things like that. And, she started to recover. She doesn't have diarrhea anymore. We alternate between giving her the special no soy, no grain, dietary cat food. We give her that for breakfast and dinner. And then in between that, we give her the chicken and rice. And she seems to be recovering somewhat. She still vomits every now and then, but she doesn't have the diarrhea anymore. So I don't know, she's kind of a ticking time bomb. She's obviously getting up there in age. She's showing symptoms of like maybe a major problem that we don't have the money to take care of. But we have her for now, and that's what's important. And, I'm very thankful for even having a little bit of extra time with her now, it's been probably 2 weeks since we took her to the vet, and it's one of those things where now you kind of cherish every moment you have left with her, because who knows how long she has left. We don't know what's wrong with her. She's getting, some of her symptoms are clearing up, but not all of them. It's a weird thing. Maybe she'll start putting weight back on now. Obviously if you have chronic diarrhea every single time you eat anything, of course, you're not retaining any nutrition, as it were. So I don't know. We don't know what's up with this cat still. She might not last until the end of the year. She might live another 3 years for all we know. We kind of went through this with a dog we had when I was growing up. We had a dog that was a Pekingese mix. I think she was technically considered a Peekapoo, which I don't know what that's crossed with. It's a Pekingese and something else. She lived to be like 20 years old almost. She was 2 weeks from her 20th birthday by the time she died. And, little dogs are not supposed to live very long. I think estimated lifespan of dogs that size is like maybe 11 years. And, she lived to be almost 20. So, you never know with pets. And, by the time that dog died, she was blind in all her eyes. She was deaf. She could barely even find the food dish to eat, but she lived, she didn't seem to be suffering until, what we would consider to be the very last minute. And by then, that was pretty obvious that, it was time to take her in. We've been fairly lucky in that regard that we haven't had too many problems with pets like that. Usually they live to be pretty old. We never have the money to take them to the vet or anything like that. And, I wrote this in a Tumblr post. If you feel bad or angry at me that, we don't take our pets into the vet to have them taken care of, to get them the medical treatments that they need. All the pets I can remember that we've had, that I can ever remember that we've had, from times before I can remember being born or alive or whatever, every pet we've ever had in my entire lifetime have been rescues. We've never gone to a pet store, never anything like that. They've always been a friend will have a dog or they'll have puppies and they'll say, oh, we got to send these to the pound or whatever. Do you want one? And, if they're being sent to a pound or whatever, puppies or kittens, those usually get adopted pretty easily. But, a lot of our adult cats, we had a Pomeranian a few years ago, a Shih Tzu, our cat May right now, they were fully grown adults when we got them because someone was moving or, whatever circumstances were such that the people, the friends, the relatives, whatever, couldn't keep the animal anymore. So they fell to us to take care of. So we're not making these animals suffer unnecessarily. We are technically giving them what would probably be a greater life than they would have had if they died in a shelter, right? May probably would have died by now if we haven't had her. Maymay was like a very special instance, and I say, if you don't know, the cat's name is Maymay. She came from a neighbor that lived next to us. And that neighbor had 4 cats. She had this giant, super fat black tabby cat called Spooky. There was Maymay and her sister Mai. And then there was an orange tabby. I don't know the name. I don't know his name. And we'd have to, cat sit for her all the time because she was gone constantly. We'd get a phone call from her that'd be like, oh, I haven't been home in 4 days. You have my key. Could you go over and feed my cats for me? We had to do that a lot. And that's kind of how we met Maymay. She was a very skittish kitty. She still is now. If anyone comes into the house that isn't me or my mom, she vanishes. She does not like strangers. But because we were over there feeding them all so much, she eventually got to be pretty friendly with us. And this neighbor ended up having to move. So she sent Mai, Spooky, and the orange tabby to the shelter. And Maymay was the only cat that she was going to keep. But she was moving like from Colorado to, it was like Arizona or California or something. And she wanted us to keep Maymay while she found, stable housing. And months and months and months and months passed. It was like 3, 4, 5 months. And she never came back to get Maymay. And eventually my mom pushed the issue enough with her that she came back and she got Maymay for she came to get her, basically. I was going to say she had her for like an hour. She came and she got Maymay. She was going to take her to Arizona with her. She got about 10 minutes away and brought Maymay back because all of us decided that, she still wasn't in a stable living condition. She was living with some family and that family had dogs and she wasn't entirely sure if the dogs would be cool with a cat. So it was just decided that she'd bring Maymay back to us and we'd keep her forever, for permanently. Because, she didn't know when she'd ever have a place that would take a cat. So Maymay then just became our cat. And if she'd gone to the shelter, with Maymay, with Mai and Spooky and all the other cats, she probably would have been put down. Hundreds of pets are put down a week in shelters. And I often think about Spooky. Spooky was this big, fat, black cat, We'd heard that, Spooky kind of ruled the roost at our neighbor's place. He'd beat up on all the other cats and kind of steal all the food. And you could tell, this cat was built like a barrel. He was extremely overweight. And I think about that, this super fat, overweight black cat being in a shelter. He was definitely put to sleep. That cat did not survive. If you don't know, black cats are like, people believe that superstition, like 100%, that black cats are bad luck. So for him to be, so fat, to be this black cat, to be in a shelter, it depresses the heck out of me to think about it. But, Spooky was probably dead by the end of that week. And we saved Maymay from that fate. Because who knows what would have happened to her if she went to the shelter, right? So, even though she is developing health problems now in her old age, that is an old age she might not have reached otherwise. And it's sad and it sucks, and I wish we had the money to take care of her better, but that's just the way it is, We gave her time she would not have otherwise had, and I am very thankful for that. She's a pet, she's an animal. I don't know if she has the cognizance to consider that, but I'd hope that she is thankful for that too. She has definitely become my best friend. She sleeps with me if she can. Most nights I keep my door closed, but, when we thought, maybe these are her last nights on Earth, I ended up, letting her sleep with me. I keep my door closed for a variety of reasons. I live with my mom and, noises and things like that. That's just how it is. But, made special exception when I figured, it'd be, maybe she wouldn't be alive by the next day. So, she slept with me in my bed and, she's very attached to me and I'm very attached to her. And it's a good thing that she's still here, but, obviously I've been made aware that the clock is ticking and who knows how long she actually has left. There are signs that she might be bouncing back fully, again, maybe she'll gain her weight back. Maybe she'll get, another 3-4 years. But I'm aware that her time is not forever. Anyway, enough depressing stuff. And it's not even really that depressing. The cat's alive. I still have her for a little while. I haven't had a chance, with all this other stuff going on, 4th of July celebrations. I went to a barbecue yesterday, or I guess day before yesterday, I think. Gosh, the days are blurring together. All these reviews and videos and, the cat getting sick and going out for 4th of July to watch the fireworks, things like that. I haven't really had a chance to retool my Patreon like I mentioned in January or in June. January, oh my gosh. Whew. You can tell it's been a time, folks. It has been a time. I said I was going to rework my Patreon. Haven't got around to that yet. I've written up a plan for things that I want to do to retool my Patreon. I might start just leaving podcast downloads, the MP3s, as a paid feature and just putting up the podcasts on YouTube with no option to download for free. That's one of the changes I'm considering. I'm considering, obviously I said like a request system, if you want me to do a video on like a specific game or like a stream or whatever, maybe there'll be a tier for that. I'll keep the tier for art requests. And then obviously, if you want me to just like say, screw all these videos, just work on a game, if you want to do that, that'll be in there somewhere. Cause I know I've really like neglected working on Overbite. That game jam was 2 years ago at this point. I still get that itch. Like I was thinking about it today, actually yesterday, about whether or not I actually needed to redo Dracula's sprites for Overbite. If you don't know, a game by Joy Masher just came out, Blazing Chrome. All these considerations for like what resolution should Overbite run at. Someone said, do it 640 by 360, because that scales up to 720p and 1080p cleanly. Blazing Chrome just came out. That game runs at 427 by 240. That scales up to 720p somewhat okay. And if I did 427 by 240, then I wouldn't have to redraw Dracula's sprite for the higher resolution. Just thinking about things like that as of yesterday. Because, people are like weirdly attached to that original Dracula sprite I did for the Game Jam version back in like 2017 or whatever. That was like 2016, wasn't it? Whew, boy. But just thinking about things like that, thinking about, the storyline of that game, there's a lot to consider on like a very deep level about the themes I want to convey in Overbite. And, I was tweeting about this like a year and a half ago that like, I found Overbite's theme. I know what I want that game's story to be now. And, I did kind of come upon like an epiphany for how to portray the story of Overbite, the complete story. But it's still something I think about from time to time. Is this going to be good enough? Should I include these elements? How should the ending play out? It is still very extremely present in my brain every single day, and I need to work on it. I need to do art for it. I thought, this game would be one and done and super easy because the Game Jam version was super easy, and just, it's been a lot of thinking about it, a lot of planning for it, and not a lot of action. And I need to rectify that. So, Patreon redesign, if you want to request that I just work on the game for a week or two, that'll be an option. You can put your money towards that. But, still ruminating on how to revamp this Patreon to better fit your needs and to get ultimately more people pledging their money to me. But that'll all come maybe next month, maybe by September. I don't know. It's complicated and weird, and I need to get through some things first, which is, story of my life at this point, really. Anyway, that's it for news, upcoming things that I'm doing or need to be done. If you would like to submit a question to this podcast, not even necessarily a question, if you just want me to read a message out on this podcast and you are a Patreon subscriber, all you have to do is send an email to you can send me anything. You can send me a question to read out. You can send me a message. Like if you have a website that you want to promote, you don't even have to own the website. If you just have a website you want me to talk about, send in an email to to the podcast email I just mentioned, just anything. I'll read it out on air in the next segment. I don't have any to read out this month, but if I had some, I would read them out. So definitely consider that. Send me a message, send me a question, and we'll see what happens. But when we come back, I'll be talking about the Switch and the things that have been revealed about the Switch right after this music. So see you then. Back. I've gotten dinner, I've checked the mail, done all that fun stuff, and it is actually a little bit after midnight now, so we're gonna try and wrap things up. I've been going to bed pretty early lately, so we'll just speed through some of these topics as quickly as I usually speed through things, especially after that rambling mess that was the first half of the podcast. I really feel like I'm getting better at like telling multi-tiered stories, I think, where we back up in time, we go forward in time. But the whole thing about my cat was just, I feel like I repeated myself a lot. Anyway, I said I was going to talk about Switch news, and as you know, I've been saving up for a Switch for quite a long time. I've been trying to actually pin down just how long it's been, since I started saving for this Switch. And it's either been since January or maybe even before Christmas. I seem to remember telling a couple of people that I was going to take it easy on Christmas presents, because I was trying to save up for a Switch. And you think, oh, well, that's kind of like a personal sort of expense thing. It's like a gift to yourself. It's also, part of my job. The whole reason I started covering, I put in air quotes covering, the whole reason, my YouTube channel and everything like that is because I won that Game Trailers video contest all the way back in 2006. August of 2006, they had that, like I said, it was a video contest. It was for lesser-known siblings of video game heroes. I think at the time, oddly enough, their example was something like Chad Vader on YouTube. And, that's kind of weird because Chad Vader, I don't think he was supposed to be the brother of Darth Vader. I mean, maybe he was, I don't know. I haven't seen Chad Vader, probably in 12 years, so maybe I'm forgetting some key important details on what Chad Vader was. But, my entry for that Game Trailers contest was the third Mario brother, about Dave Mario, Super Dave Mario. And it won me $1,000, and with that $1,000, I bought a PlayStation 2, a Nintendo DS, and an Xbox 360. And that was probably the first time I'd had a current gen console, since the Super Nintendo, right? I had a Super Nintendo of my own in 1992, which was 2 years after the system launched. I didn't get a GameCube until 2004, so that was a year and a half before the Wii came out. I didn't get a PS2 until after the PS3 was out. So that Xbox 360 being 2006, a year after launch, that was a big deal that fueled my whole YouTube channel. My very first video review was an Xbox 360 game in 2009. It was a big deal having something current like that. And I've, tried to keep current since then. I ended up with a hand-me-down 3DS from a friend. That was really cool of him to send it to me. I paid for half of my PlayStation 4. I think I paid for half of my Wii U. And I kind of wanted to repay it back to Tristan because he's the one who paid for half of those consoles, for me to be able to review games for TSSE. So I kind of wanted to prove that, hey, I can handle this on my own. I'll save up the money. And thankfully I had, like I've said earlier in past podcasts, I had a few YouTube videos this year do semi-okay, not like gangbuster numbers like I did back in 2017 where, I had over $1,000 to move into this apartment with. But, I had enough money to where, I'm getting up to the point where I can think about buying a Switch and maybe like a few games with it. Maybe not right this second because I had to help pay for my cat's medical bill. Just going in for the checkup and everything was like $160, something like that. And, we still don't know if she's completely out of the woods yet, but I digress. Point is, I've been looking at Switch deals, and there have been rumors swirling around for several months now. You hear things through the grapevine that, hey, Nintendo's sort of planning a lot of stuff around September, a lot of game releases, maybe they're planning something there, and there have been rumors about an updated Switch since last year at least. So, partially it was me trying to save up more and more money so that I could, when I finally took the plunge and bought my Switch, I would have enough for say accessories or maybe even 3 or 4 games. And, I'd get the most recent revision of the hardware. And what Nintendo ended up announcing was basically the 2DS for the Switch. So you had the Nintendo 3DS, which had this, really awesome 3D effect that, was kind of hit or miss. It wasn't super accurate. They kind of later helped fix it with the new 3DS XL, which kind of had this facial tracking technology so that, you stayed in the sweet spot for the 3D a little bit easier. But beyond that, they announced something called a 2DS, which is a cheaper model of the 3DS. It gets rid of all these extra features that aren't necessary. It got rid of the clamshell. It got rid of, certain buttons didn't work anymore. It got rid of the 3D effect. It was a cheaper, more budget-conscious version of the 3DS, aimed more at children. I think the 2DS, I almost said 2DS, 2DS XL, that's what I was going to say, but it's just the 2DS. I think that was $90 when it came out versus $140 for the base 3DS. So, it was considerably cheaper. And I remember, I had a nephew back in Colorado who got a 2DS with, Mario Kart and all this other stuff. And that's basically what Nintendo announced for the Switch. It gets rid of the detachable Joy-Cons. It gets rid of HD Rumble. It gets rid of TV Play. It is strictly a portable device. They call it the Switch Mini. And to say that I was disappointed by it would be kind of an understatement. I fully accept it's not for me. They're making a cheaper model of the Switch so that when Pokemon Sword and Shield come out, kids have an option, a more affordable option that their parents would more easily be willing to spend. The Switch Mini is fully $100 cheaper than the normal Nintendo Switch. But, the rumors were that Nintendo would have a less powerful version of the Switch, maybe, like the Switch Mini is, a fully portable version of the Switch, no detachable Joy-Cons or anything like that. But part of that rumor was something called the Switch Pro, which would be a slightly more powerful version of the Switch, with slightly enhanced 3D capabilities, better battery life, things like that. So even though the Switch Mini or the Switch Lite, I guess, was announced, I was still kind of sitting on the money I'd been saving up on the hopes that something else would be announced soon. Because, I didn't want to be the idiot that runs out and buys a Switch and, then 3 or 6 or even 9 months later, Nintendo announces this new hardware revision. And it seems like my waiting paid off because there is a kind of sort of new version of the Switch. It doesn't sound like it's going to be any more powerful than the current version, even though it's going to be using a more advanced version of the Switch CPU. It'll theoretically be able to run games better but knowing Nintendo, it probably won't have that function enabled or anything like that. It's not even like going under a new name. It'll just be like the Switch version 1.25 or something, you know. But they are saying that it will have better battery life. People are hoping that maybe it'll have like better Joy-Cons. Not necessarily like a D-pad, because that's one of the things that the new Switch Lite has. It has like a proper D-pad where the left Joy-Con would be. But, you know, because like the big thing in the news right now is Joy-Con drift. You know, once Joy-Cons reach a certain age, the analog sticks on them start to become a little loose, or the dead zone gets a little screwy or something like that, and they can't center themselves properly anymore. And so far, like, Nintendo's whole response to this is, oh, just send them in to be serviced. We'll service them for free and send them back. You know, they say for free, but it still costs like $4 shipping to send it to Nintendo to be repaired. There's actually talk that, you know, there might be a class action lawsuit starting regarding the Joy-Con drift here soon. There's, you know, rumblings on social media and things like that. In fact, just, you know, 5 or 10 minutes ago, I read a response where, you know, Nintendo officially responded to people complaining about the Joy-Con drift, and their response was just, you know, contact support and send it in for repair. So that's not a very elegant response to this. There probably will be, someone will try and launch a class action lawsuit against Joy-Con drift. I don't know if it'll be successful. But people, you know, some are hoping that maybe this new revision of the Switch hardware with a better battery life, maybe it'll have better Joy-Cons in it. You know, Nintendo likes to sneak weird stuff in there like that. You know, I'm sure that when this new system will come out, you know, Digital Foundry will do a whole breakdown. There'll be all this information about weird little things that have been changed. The big thing, like, the real reason Nintendo would want to revise the hardware like this is because of piracy. If you didn't know, it is possible to install custom firmware into the old Switch firmware because of it's like, you know, it's like how you'd mod your Wii or mod your Wii U. But this time, instead of it being like a bug in a specific game, or, you know, like if you've ever modded an old Wii, one of the ways you could mod the Wii was to have a specific game, like, say, Lego Indiana Jones. You download a save file off the internet onto an SD card, load that SD card into your Wii console, and then it would contain a save file for Lego Indiana Jones that would let you soft mod the console, install your own custom firmware, right? And that required a piece of software to do. Same thing works with the Wii U. I was just reading a few weeks ago that one of the reasons, if you go into the Wii U eShop right now, the number one best-selling game is always the 3DS virtual, or the regular DS virtual console version of Brain Training, because it's the same exact thing. If you own Brain Training for the Wii U, which is, again, a virtual console DS port, you load in a save file off of an SD card, load it into Brain Training, you can soft mod your Wii U with custom firmware. And that is the reason why it's the best-selling game on the Wii U eShop, is because you can use it to soft mod your console. And for whatever reason, Nintendo never took it down. They just leave it up. Because I guess, you know, they don't care about the Wii U anymore, so it's just kind of open season. For the Switch custom firmware, it is a hardware flaw. It is impossible for Nintendo to patch it out. And that's because it has something to do with, like, the NVIDIA Tegra processor or whatever that's in the Switch. So by issuing a new hardware revision with a brand new version of the Tegra chip, they get rid of this hardware flaw and prevent people from installing custom firmware. So the trade-off you get is you get better battery life, but it's harder to mod the system, which, you know, as much as I'd like to mod my Switch when I get it, I haven't even bothered custom firmware modding my Wii U, which, you know, thinking about it now, maybe I should look into. But, you know, that's just how it is. That's the real reason behind Nintendo offering an updated piece of Switch hardware so that they can get rid of this security flaw and prevent people from soft modding their consoles. But, you know, I'll gladly take better battery life. And it kind of puts the confidence in me that Nintendo isn't going to release any kind of Switch Pro anytime soon. It'll be at least a year, maybe two, until an actual more powerful Switch comes out. If they're bothering with this longer battery life version now, instead of, waiting, around Christmas or a little bit after Christmas to say, hey, later in 2020, we've got a new version of the Switch hardware coming, and Breath of the Wild runs 1080p 60 frames per second on it. They're not going to do that. If they're doing this hardware revision now, this is all we're getting for a while, which, is fine. I'm not going to complain too loudly about it. It would be nice to have a more powerful Switch, but you also kind of get the impression that Nintendo is sort of bumping up against a lot of hardware limitations here. Between, just the battery life, right? Their projected battery life for the Switch, the original Switch and the Switch Lite, is 3 hours per session, which, isn't terrible, but isn't great either. My 3DS lasts longer than that, Ooh, excuse me, sorry. Weird hiccup there. My 3DS lasts longer than that, obviously. So, I'm happier that they're going to be coming out with a version of the Switch that instead of a 3-hour battery life is pushing maybe 4.5, even 5 hours of battery. They can't reliably make the hardware any faster than that because it's just going to eat into that battery life some more, right? That's kind of like the whole issue here is that, you always have to balance battery versus power. So, it's not a big deal to me. They'll probably release a more powerful version of the Switch in the future. Nintendo's been saying for a while, ever since Iwata was still alive, that they kind of want to chase the whole idea of phone releases, right? Which is, slightly improved hardware every couple years, let's say. And, you kind of get the impression that maybe that's what the Xbox is doing, that's what the PlayStation's doing, between the Xbox One X, the PlayStation 4 Pro, we'll get to a Switch Pro eventually. And if we don't, whatever. Nintendo's a weird company. They do lots of weird one-off stuff. There are a lot of games that will never work properly on the Switch because the Switch does not function like the Wii U. The Switch does not function like the DS. The Switch does not function like the 3DS. The Switch barely functions like a Nintendo Wii, from what I understand. So, it's just, Nintendo's a weird company, I guess, is my whole problem. Anyway, I will probably have a Switch whenever this updated version of the hardware comes out with the longer battery life. I think there was also a rumor that it would come with more internal storage, which would be nice. There are rumors that could be hitting as soon as August 1st, that could be hitting as late as late August. So I could be having a new Switch sooner than later, let's say. Finally get my Mario Maker on. Finally play Super Mario Odyssey, even though I've already spoiled that entire game for myself. Probably won't rebuy Breath of the Wild. I was replaying that on an emulator and I kind of got my fill. Obviously, I put 300 hours into the Wii U version. I don't know if I'd rebuy Mario Kart 8. By all measures, it sounds like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe might be a worse version of Mario Kart 8, at least worse by my standards. Mario Kart 8 pushes things maybe a little bit closer into the chaotic party game territory with the way it makes slight tweaks to the item balance and things like that. I don't know what else I'd get for a Switch. It was kind of the whole problem, right? When the Switch Lite announcement hit, it kind of threw my whole everything into question. It really made me stop and consider whether or not I even wanted a Switch at all. Because really, there's 4 games for it that I'd want. But it is a little bit more about future-proofing, I guess, in the sense that, Nintendo will continue to release games for this. It wouldn't surprise me if the Switch got, 2 Mario Kart games. Probably, for the first time ever. Obviously, they're going to do 2 Zelda games for it. The sequel to Breath of the Wild is coming out on the Switch, probably. You never know when it comes to Zelda games, how long that's going to be delayed. Link's Awakening is coming out on the Switch, but, I don't know if I necessarily want that. I played through the Game Boy version of Link's Awakening, like, I don't know, 2 years ago. And I'm not in any kind of, like, big thirsty rush to experience that again. And it really does seem like a direct port of Link's Awakening with, much prettier graphics, I'll give them that. But in terms of the gameplay, the Link's Awakening remake might not really be doing it for me. So, I was just questioning whether or not I even wanted a Switch. I don't want it for, like, Doom. I don't want it for Wolfenstein. I don't want it for The Witcher 3. I kind of got bored of Dragon Ball Fighter Z on my PlayStation 4 because the story mode in that game was such garbage. I could probably stand to replay Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze again. That's a game that could exist in my library a second time. There are rumors of a Super Mario 3D World port coming soon for the Switch, obviously. That would be fine if they added new levels or something. I never played Captain Toad. I guess I could play that. But it's just the Switch Mini or the Switch Lite or whatever they want to call it. When the announcement hit, it was just kind of like, if this is their big new and improved Switch, do I even really want any of this? And I was having a lot of doubts. And, now that we have a newer Switch announced, a very incremental upgrade, let's say, better battery life and things like that, I'm still kind of wondering, how much do I want a Switch? If I have $380 saved up, and, that's not a lot of money right now. But again, had to pay money for the cat. I helped a friend out with a monetary problem they were having a few days ago, things like that. That's not really enough to buy us more than just a Switch in one game, but, with the way things will work themselves out, I'm getting paid for house sitting in a few weeks, things like that. I will have made that money back up, let's say. So I'll be back up to, we'll say, like $450 for a Switch. That $450 could go to all kinds of other things. I could buy a new motherboard and a processor for my computer, which would bring me a little bit more up to speed, kind of fill in the gaps as this computer starts to age. I could buy an Xbox One X, which has a built-in library of basically every game I own for the Xbox 360. I could buy a lot of hardware for making better videos. I could, buy a proper webcam so that I could do Let's Plays with, a camera on me at all times, like I was doing with my Dare to Scare videos a few years ago. There are a lot of options open when you have $450 to play with. I could buy that microphone arm. I could buy a better microphone, period. I could buy lights for, studio setup stuff. I could buy that memory card for my camera that would supposedly stop it from overheating. I could buy all kinds of other stuff. I could buy a bunch of video games as if I need more of those, right? Buy a new TV. I could use a new TV. This TV I have here is like 6 years old at this point. And it has an ant trapped between the bezel and the glass it's a dead ant. I'll never be able to get rid of it. The only solution there would be to buy a new TV, and TVs are getting real cheap. Like, you could get a really nice, 40-inch TV, 4K, HDR, the works, for $380. So I could get a really nice TV. I don't have to get a Switch, do I? I could buy a new 3DS XL. That's something I've wanted. The games I have right now will look better, play better. I don't have to get a Switch. And it's just, it's a difficult thing to think about, because I don't have money like this often. As it stands, it took me 7, 8, maybe even 9 months to save up this money. It's a very important thing that I spend this money wisely, because if I make a mistake, who knows how long it'll be until I can correct that mistake. And it's It's really crazy, and spending this much money on something like this, it kind of makes me sick in a way. Like I just, if I don't spend it, then you get this kind of ache in your brain, it's burning a hole in your pocket. You need to spend it, but you don't want to spend it frivolously. And it's just, having money is stressful. I guess that's the long and short of it, really. Having money is stressful. But all along, all this time, that has been known as my Switch fund. So I should just buy a Switch, and I'll probably buy a Switch. But I may also feel massive constant pangs of buyer's remorse as soon as I do. So I don't know. That's where I am on the Switch. Support me on Patreon so that maybe this will stress me out less if it's not such a big deal to spend $450 on a video game console. That's what you should do, really. Everyone should pitch in $1 to my Patreon. I think that's it for this section. We'll take another quick break, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the games I've been playing this month. And, you probably already know a couple of them. But we have more in store. We'll talk about it when we get there, so I'll see you after the music. We're back for the third and final segment, which is usually just me talking about the video games I've been playing. And as you might expect, first up would be SolSeraph, the Ace Team developed and Sega published tribute/spiritual successor to ActRaiser, a Super Nintendo launch title from the 1990s. You can just read my review for more in-depth discussion or whatever, more in-depth opinions on whether or not I think this is a good game, but a lot of people have been really harsh towards this game, and if you read my review, I'm not super thrilled about it either, but I feel like a lot of the response that I've seen from certain people, from folks like Jim Sterling and whatever else, has been a little over the top negative, I'd say. It's not the best game in the world or anything like that. But I keep seeing this sentiment that, SolSeraph, destroys the memory of ActRaiser, or, it craps on the legacy or whatever else, all this weird over the top, reverence for the original ActRaiser. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of people that still hold ActRaiser with, as this, quirky game supreme or whatever. I don't know. People love ActRaiser is the point I'm trying to get across. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the people going to bat for ActRaiser that are saying, SolSeraph is such a bad game, I'm willing to bet that they haven't actually played ActRaiser in probably going on a decade. One of the things I did for my review is I actually went back and I played the first third of ActRaiser. Just, to compare and contrast, because that's kind of my whole thing. One of the things I've had people almost complain about with my reviews is that I spend, so long talking about, historical information about a game. I had someone yell at me for one of my Sonic Racing reviews, one of the very first ones, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Someone complained about how much I was talking about Mario Kart in that review. And that's just, that's what I like to do. I kind of like to examine things on the bigger picture and look at it in the context of an entire genre or, a whole series of games. And, for this SolSeraph review, I went back and I played, 2 hours of ActRaiser. And without a doubt, without a question, SolSeraph is a better game than ActRaiser. ActRaiser actually, like, after all this time, it kind of sucks. The action game levels, like, well, okay, if you've never played ActRaiser, it's kind of like one half is a city building simulator and the other half is like an action game. And doing things in one will affect how you do things in another. So, the point of the city building levels is that you're supposed to guide your citizens of the city to build roads towards monster lairs so that they can seal away the evil in the land. And then you play an action game level where you kind of like fight through this almost like classic Castlevania, like NES 8-bit action game Castlevania stuff. You fight through all these monsters and get to a boss, and then the evil monster for that area is defeated. And then you move on to the next city and you do the whole thing all over again. And all of it sucks. All of it. Like, I am very much like pro retro gamer. I love retro games. When people ask questions like, does Super Mario World still hold up? It's like, of course it holds up. What is the matter with you? I'm that kind of person. I love retro games. I will defend retro games until the day I die. ActRaiser is a bad retro game. Straight up, no hesitation. It is just, it's garbage. Like, it's very experimental. The controls in the action game levels are terrible. Worse than any NES game that has ever been. That we're not even talking like, Ghouls and Ghosts with its very deliberate jump where you don't have any air control or anything like that. No, it's not like that. It's not fun to play. It's weirdly like springy in a way that's not very, you don't feel comfortable moving in that game. The range of your attack is just terrible. There's too many enemies. They move too quickly. You move too quickly. Platforming is a nightmare. The action game sections in ActRaiser are abysmal. And when you get to the city building segments, they're even worse. You have no direct control over where these people build, how quickly they build. Your main goal in the city building sections is to point out a monster lair, tell your disciples to build a road in that direction, and then for 3 to 5, maybe even 10 minutes, you play this really terrible top-down shooter where every 10 seconds, monsters will respawn out of the evil monster lairs, and you have to fly around and hit them with these tiny little arrows. And that's all you do, while you wait for your citizens to build this road and seal the lair. By comparison, SolSeraph is, 1,000 times better than that. It controls way better during the action game stages. There's way more to do during the action game stages. You have like all these sub-weapons and magic abilities. During the city building segments, they kind of completely redesigned those from the ground up. So now they're this sort of, if you've ever played like Age of Empires, it's kind of like that mixed with a tower defense. You're building like huts to generate people. You need people to go cut down lumber, to have more material to build more buildings. You need people to work the farms so that you have more food to generate more people. Then you build like barracks and sniper towers and things like that. Very Age of Empires style structures along this road that monsters funnel into. Eventually it's the closest part to ActRaiser is that you have to, again, build roads out near where monster lairs are so that you can put a person out there to perform a ritual to, reveal the monster lair so that you can go fight the monster that's within. It is, 1,000 times better than the original ActRaiser was, but even in that context, it feels like a really budget, really cheap, really poorly made game. It's on the PlayStation 4 Pro, it has like frame rate problems for no reason. It has these really annoying cutscenes that are constantly interrupting the gameplay. The graphics are honestly like very ugly. The artwork, like the character designs are good, but the way they are rendered looks like a student project essentially. And like, not even in a charming way, and like just they were making do with whatever they could afford, and whatever they could afford had to have been made for free, basically. Like in something I didn't point out in my review that I wanted to, but I have screenshots of it in that review. The very first area you start out in, the very last action game stage you play in that first zone has this giant tree that you ascend up. And now I want you to think about the way tree bark looks, right? You know, that kind of rough texture. It's all kind of like these lines almost flowing in a certain direction. That's not the way the bark texture in that level works at all. It's all like these vertical lines, even when you have, horizontal branches, it just doesn't look right because the texture was applied quickly, it was applied cheaply. That whole area was probably made in like a day. That's kind of what it feels like. There's just no polish to anything at all. That doesn't mean it's impossible to have fun with the game. It's incredibly budget, incredibly unpolished. Good ideas, but just really slapdash, sloppy execution, I guess. Pick it up for $5 and maybe you'll have some fun. But I think they're charging $15 for it now, and I don't necessarily think it would be worth $15. After that would be Crash Team Racing, Nitro Fueled, the HD remaster of the original PlayStation game. This is going to be kind of spoilers from my review, but I'm not super hot on that game either. Like the original Crash Team Racing on the PlayStation 1, I love that game. That if we're talking like top 10 kart racers ever made, that would, on that list would be like Mario Kart DS, Mario Kart 7, Mario Kart 8, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, Diddy Kong Racing, and Crash Team Racing. Those would all be on the list. This new version of Crash Team Racing, on the surface, appears to be an identical updated port of the original Crash Team Racing, just with prettier graphics. But the more you start to play it, the more problems kind of begin to arise. They made the computer artificial intelligence way smarter, so the game is like 10 times as difficult as the original PlayStation game was. All of the weapon balance, this is something, because, I generally play these games single player, like maybe I'm a weirdo or whatever else, but I never really had very many friends around that would actually want to play these games with me. I had, maybe family members every now and then, but, generally they never wanted to play video games with me. So, that's part of the reason why I like single player games, is because that's all I've ever played basically my entire life is just, single player games. I don't play multiplayer games unless someone invites me to play them with them. And usually it's, very close friends. It's usually family members, things like that. Even casual friends, I usually try to avoid playing multiplayer games with. It's, a very specific subset of people. So, as far as Crash Team Racing's weapon balance goes, I never encountered it outside of the context of the original single-player game. That game had like a whole adventure mode where you go through all the tracks and you race all the computer-controlled opponents and there's a boss at the end of each world. Things like that. And in that context, it seemed balanced, but you put it into this new game with the smarter artificial intelligence, with online multiplayer, and suddenly, this game feels really, really unfair. Your defensive options in this game may as well not exist at all. It is so hard to defend against incoming attacks in this new Crash Team Racing game that it feels like a nightmare every time I play it. And then on top of that, they slather this unlock system that feels like it's right out of Fortnite. You have this store menu with all these time-limited unlocks. It's again, like I related Fortnite just now, and that's exactly what it is. Every 24 hours, it rotates out for a new set of 10 unlockables. And if what you want to unlock isn't available for that day, you just have to wait until the next day. This system, there's no real money involved, thankfully. It's sort of like Team Sonic Racing in that you sort of, after every race, you get this currency. In this case, in the case of Crash Team Racing, it's Wumpa coins. But the problem is, things in the store in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled often cost like over 1,000 Wumpa coins, often up to like 4,000, 5,000. There may even be like collections of things that are like 7,000 coins. I don't remember, but it is, multiple thousands. But best case scenario, if you're playing by yourself in single player, you'll earn like 20 to 30 coins per race. So, saving up the thousands and thousands and thousands required to unlock even just one item is nearly impossible. It's this huge, tedious grind that is just a nightmare to deal with. Things speed up a little bit if you take the game online, but that just means that you're required to pay for Xbox Live Gold or PlayStation Plus or the Switch Online. And if you can't pay for those online subscriptions, you're stuck just very slowly grinding out these unlocks. And that's if you have internet at all. If you don't have internet, if the game cannot connect to the internet, then you don't earn coins at all. You cannot unlock anything in that game unless you have an internet connection to earn coins through. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is just, that game does not make me happy. I almost said it's not fun. That's not true. There is fun in there, and I remember the PlayStation 1 game being fun, and again, sort of like with SolSeraph, where, I went back and I played the original ActRaiser, I went back and I played the PlayStation 1 version of Crash Team Racing, and I still think that's a pretty good game. You can kind of see the genesis of where the ideas for the HD remaster kind of got out of control a little bit, but that original PlayStation 1 game is still pretty alright. It's just the HD remaster feels like it is catering to the hardest of hardcore players in a way that I do not find enjoyable even a little bit. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people out there that are like, oh, I like how hard it is, and good for them. I'm happy that they like to torture themselves, but that's not me, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of other people either. So I'm pretty down on that version of the game. So look for that review to be coming soon. Look for that video to be coming soon. What else have I played this month? I played like 3 hours of Castlevania 64. I can't really explain why. Essentially, I figured out how to emulate N64 games on my Android tablet. For a while now, I've been emulating games on my Android tablet through a front end called RetroArch. And usually, RetroArch will handle almost everything you need it to do. NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Sega CD, 32X, PlayStation Saturn, N64, GameCube, Wii, PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable, DOS, Amiga, MAME, you name it, RetroArch probably can do it. But not all of those emulators work super well on Android. RetroArch, feels like it works a little bit better on Linux, maybe Windows. I usually mainly use it through Windows. Excuse me. So, Super Nintendo games, NES games, Genesis games all run fine on my Android tablet. But when it comes to N64 games, that's where I start having problems. And what I ended up having to do is download the emulator outside of RetroArch. The N64 emulator that I think everyone kind of uses nowadays is called MuPen64. It's kind of like the most compatible, most feature-complete N64 emulator currently out there. Trying to play MuPen64 through RetroArch on Android doesn't really work super well. You get frame rate problems constantly. It's just kind of a nightmare. But if you go on the Google Play Store, here, let me actually get the name of the app here, because there are several different builds of MuPen64 on the Android App Store. MuPen64 Plus FZ is what it's called. It is a standalone N64 Android emulator, and it works very well, actually. It doesn't work quite as well as MuPen64 does on Windows, but in terms of how well games run on my Android tablet, I've been playing Super Mario 64, Super Smash Brothers, GoldenEye, Beetle Adventure Racing, Banjo-Kazooie, basically more or less everything that you want. It's missing some features that do make some games run a little bit too slow. Off-road racing challenge doesn't work super well. There's some other games I haven't tried yet. I suspect that like Paper Mario won't work super well on this. But basically, I was testing out games. I was seeing how well they run. I'd put Castlevania 64 on here, and for just, while we kind of waited to figure out what we were going to do with the cat, whether or not to take her into the vet or not, I just kind of sat here one day and played 3 hours of Castlevania 64. It was about, around half the game, and I guess my opinion on Castlevania 64 is that it's actually not as bad as I was led to believe. It's not a great game, not by any stretch of the imagination. It still has, it definitely has like a lot of problems. But I feel like in the modern context, it feels a little closer to, say, something like Dark Souls. And, not to turn this into like that kind of conversation where like, oh, it's the Dark Souls of whatever, Dark Souls is a shorthand for difficult games or whatever. But I just mean in terms of the way environments are set up, it's got like a very slight Dark Souls feeling to it. Kind of the slowness with the way combat works. Definitely, people have said Dark Souls and especially Bloodborne are, very close to the Castlevania aesthetic in terms of like, fighting undead, fighting skeletons, things like that. But it just, I had a little bit of fun with it. But you really have to kind of be aware of its problems. I'm like, obviously, right? But its problems is that, like, yes, Castlevania 64 is a very difficult game. It's kind of like this weird half step between something like Symphony of the Night and like a classic action game Castlevania on the NES or whatever, right? So, it's very exploration based. It's very puzzle based. I think in that first level, to solve puzzles, you flip like 8 switches in that level, to open various gates and doors and things like that. And then, the puzzles only get more complex from there on. At some points, Castlevania 64 almost feels more like a Resident Evil game because, you're matching locks to doors and it's all these, long hallways and like this mansion. It feels very survival horror. Ooh, my voice is starting to give out because I've been talking so much tonight. It's actually coming up on 3 a.m. here. Anyway, the main thing that like really kind of made me sad with Castlevania 64, number one, there are a lot of instant death traps in that game. Kind of keeping with the action game Castlevania formula, spike pits instantly kill you. There's a lot of bottomless pits. And when you do die, there are save points located around almost everywhere. Again, sort of taking from the Symphony of the Night mold, where, you kind of explore around and can save wherever you want, wherever you find a save point. And when you die, you start back at the last place you saved. But the problem is, like a classic Castlevania game, you get like power-ups for your whip that make your attacks stronger. But when you die, you lose all those power-ups again, and you have to find them again by, just like classic Castlevania games, you have to whip candles and things like that, which is insane because in the context of this being, at points sort of like Resident Evil, at points sort of like Symphony of the Night, at points sort of like Dark Souls, there's not always candles around for you to whip. Sometimes you just hit like a section of level where you go like an hour without having any candles to whip to get any extra sub-weapon energy or anything like that, and you're just stuck with your basic whip for this entire hour, and that is ridiculous insanity. You feel so weak just because you died at a certain point. And there's this really nasty point, like right before the halfway point of the game, where you're stuck in like this hedge maze with this Frankenstein monster that has a chainsaw, and he has like 2 terror dogs with him, like out of the Ghostbusters movie. And it's just a really annoying section of the game. It's really super easy to die. And if you die at that point, you're like extra triple double hosed, because you get so weak that you can't really defend yourself against these monsters. It is really weird but more interesting than what I've played of the PlayStation 2 Castlevania games, because those always had, I think, like really boring environment design, if you ask me. I think I played, what is it, Lament of Innocence? I feel like I played, it's whatever the one is with like the mini devils and you collect like furniture. But it had like such boring environment designs. Everything was made out of like these boxy square rooms, and it just wasn't very fun to explore the castle. And Castlevania 64, is actually like a ton of fun in that regard. Exploring these environments, it's pretty cool. There's, fun little details like breakable mirrors. There's, cool NPCs. There's skeletons that ride motorcycles. It is, it tries to be an interesting game conceptually, which is more than I can say for those PS2 games. And it's not as bad as I thought. And part of that is because, playing it on an emulator, I can just save state wherever I want. And this is one of those games where I feel like you're encouraged to use save states. It has a save system of its own, but why bother with that? Just save state wherever you want, because there will be parts where the difficulty spikes like super crazy high for like 5 or 10 minutes, and nobody's really going to blame you if you save scum through that part. That's kind of just what you have to do to deal with old games sometimes, and this is definitely a moment where that classifies. I've been trying to find, time to go back to it every now and then, but I have to set up the tablet. I have to plug in my controller adapter, all that stuff. It's not that difficult, but it is difficult enough to where I haven't touched it, again, ever since we had to take our cat into the vet, which was, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago at this point. But, again, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I've heard that the pseudo-sequel Castlevania Legacy of Darkness, also for the N64, is even better. But I very specifically wanted to play a 3D Castlevania game with a whip, and that's kind of what I got here. I won't say it's great fun, but I had enough fun to where I kind of feel like I want to finish it. It's just weird and interesting enough that, I kind of have that drive now that I've made it about halfway through the game that I kind of want to see it out. So, maybe next month we'll talk a little bit more about Castlevania 64, or maybe we won't, who knows? You never can tell with me, can you? Last thing here on the list is checking in with A Link Between Worlds. I didn't really talk about it last month, but I did end up, looking through a FAQ, figuring out the really, wait, did I? Yeah, okay, I didn't talk about this last month, but I should have. I checked a FAQ, figured out the really stupid way that I was stuck. I'd missed all the super obvious clues to get into the first dungeon in low rule. And now that I figured that out, now that I've, gone through the Thieves dungeon, or whatever you want to call it, that very first low rule dungeon, I'm kind of off to the races. I've done one more dungeon beyond that. So now I am on my third low rule dungeon, which is the Desert Palace. I think after I did the Thieves dungeon, I did the Water Palace, maybe? I don't remember. It's the water area right next to the Desert Palace. So, I'm on my third dungeon, still plugging away through the game. It is, now that I know where to go and what to do, and I've gotten through this silly roadblock, it's back to being like a very fun Zelda game again. I'm very glad that they're still giving me, new items. I finally just got the Titan's Glove again. It is, it's a good Zelda game. I'm back on board with A Link Between Worlds. But that's it for the month. That's everything I've been playing. That's everything that's coming up. That's my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch Lite, and whether or not I'm going to be buying a new Nintendo Switch soon. Make sure you check out my Patreon. Make sure you consider donating. If you want to buy me a birthday present this month, you are welcome to try, though it is not required. That's just, I've surprisingly cared very little about not really getting a lot of super great birthday presents this year, because I'm just getting to that age, and I don't want to feel like I'm begging for anything, But there will be a link in the show notes where you can find various wish lists that if you buy off a wish list, it will send it directly to my doorstep. in theory, with all the Amazon shenanigans I've been having lately. Who really knows? But I also have more wish lists than what is listed on Amazon. You can also just send me money directly through Ko-fi, paypal.me. You can up your pledge here on Patreon. You can pledge it all if you're listening to this for free on the YouTubes. But I will see you guys, some of you guys, in August. And for the freebie users, you'll be hearing what I have to say next in September. So I'll see you all then, hopefully for cooler weather. Bye-bye.